Thank you, Julie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Karim Atif, and I am the chair of the IIRSM branch in Egypt. Welcome to the 13th IIRSM branch meeting. Our guest speaker for today's meeting is Andy Farrell. Andy is both a fellow member of the IIRSM and a chartered member of the IOSH. He also holds membership of the Institute of Industrial Accident Investigators and a membership of the Institute of Leadership and Management. And he is accredited as a health and safety consultant with the UK Occupational Safety and Health Consultants Register. During his career as a health and safety specialist, he has undertaken a wide range of consultancy and training projects, including a forensic investigation into the potential legal liabilities arising from the collapse of a building, which was undergoing refurbishment in central London, acting in this case as advisor to the Defence Council, the development and presentation at board level of a specialist safety course for managers in the gas distribution sector, and developing and presenting a series of courses on critical decision making for paramedics and officers in the Irish National Ambulance Service, done in partnership with the National Ambulance Service College. He has also written a book on interview techniques, investigative interviewing, a practical guide for managers. His current commercial projects include developing and presenting a series of management webinars for a prestigious UK training company and co-authoring both a book and training course on fundamentals of health and safety management for non-specialist managers and directors. So our agenda for today's meeting, firstly, I will speak about our branch updates. After that, we will listen to Andy, who will be presenting on the challenges and practicalities of taking witness statements. Finally, as Julie said, there will be a Q&A session. So if you have any comment regarding to the topic of the webinar, feel free to submit it in the question box and we will answer all your questions before the end of the meeting. The IIRSM is carrying out a survey of their members and stakeholders to gauge how their organizations approach risk management across the organization and the value risk management knowledge and skills contribute. So your views are essential to this critical piece of research. So please take a few minutes to complete the IIRSM survey. It should take no more than 10 minutes, and the results will be or will support a report on risk management in practice. So please check your IIRSM update newsletter, which was sent, I think, last Friday, to see the link and participate in the meeting. Regarding to the future branch meetings, the IIRSM Egypt branch meetings, as usual, we will be delivered a meeting on monthly basis. However, we will not deliver a meeting on next month. So the next meeting will be on the 10th of January 2023. The topic and the speaker will be confirmed shortly. Regarding to the CPD and training opportunities, for the IIRSM members who will need to apply for a fellowship, the IIRSM will deliver a CPD event to know more details about why to apply for fellowship and how to complete the application and what the supporting documents you need to provide. So Donna Gordon and Hugh Maxwell will lead the session on the 29th of November. Regarding to the international branch meetings, there will be 6 upcoming international branch meetings delivered in November. The first one is the UAE branch meeting, which will be tomorrow. Franco Denenberg will be presenting on sustainable construction and the role of HSC professional. The second one is India branch meeting, which will be on the 10th of November. Mike Scotland will be presenting on mental health. And the third meeting will be the KSA branch meeting, which will be on the 15th of November. The fourth one is Europe branch meeting, which will be on the 22nd of November. Also, Andy Farrell will be presenting on critical thinking, decision making in times of crisis. The fifth one is Qatar branch meeting, which will be also on the 22nd of November. And the final one is another India branch meeting, which will be on the 23rd of November. Regarding to the UK branch meeting, there will be one upcoming branch meeting delivered in November, which will be West Midlands branch meeting. This meeting will be on the 10th of November. Stephen Harris will be presenting on business resilience and crisis management. So you can visit the IIRSM website to find out more information and details about the mentioned meetings, along with how to register for those meetings. So that's the update regarding to our branch. So now I will hand over the meeting to Andy, who will be presenting on the challenges and practicalities of taking a literacy statement.
Lovely. Thank you, Karim. Appreciate that. Just checking, my slides are working all right, are they? Lovely.
Yes, they are.
Thank you. I don't trust computers. Right. Well, welcome everybody to this presentation. Looking at the challenges and the practicalities of taking witness statements. As I think Carrie mentioned, I've got a background, a very varied background, for including some years with law enforcement in the UK, and so I have practical experience of taking many witness statements. So it can be tedious, but it works. So let's have a look at this. Witness statements, they are an integral part of the investigation process, but they're an element that is often misunderstood. And what we're going to do in this webinar is to look at how things can go wrong and how to make them go right. We'll look at some of the problems and some of the common pitfalls in taking statements. So that's the background. So let's just start at the beginning. What is the purpose of a statement? Well, if you think about it, an investigation is like a jigsaw puzzle. There are lots of bits and pieces lying around. You probably haven't got a photograph of what it's meant to represent, and you somehow got to put it all together. And witness statements are a crucial part of this. They're not just pieces of the puzzle. Each one has its own part to play in explaining what happens, in helping you to build the final picture. So each witness statement has to be accurate and complete. Otherwise, the parts aren't going to fit together properly, and there are going to be gaps. The other point, of course, the witness statement is that you have to keep a record of the investigation. Now, obviously, with investigation, you talk to people, but you need to have a record of exactly what was said and get them to agree that's what they want to say if you're going to take the investigation forward, especially if it ends up going to legal proceedings or disciplinaries or whatever. So the witness statement supports the conversation you've had with the witness, and it is therefore a vital piece of evidence. So deciding what the statement is fine. When are you going to take the statement? Well, ideally, you should take a written statement as soon as possible after the event. And the reason that is fairly straightforward. Otherwise, people will tend to forget the detail of what happened. You want to get to them when it's still fresh in their mind. If for some reason the statement's got to be delayed, maybe there's just you on your own trying to do the whole investigation, and so you're having to cover a lot of things at the same time, then at least get a brief summary of what they've seen or what was done, and then you can go back to that later on in the full interview and expand on the brief note, but at least you got an idea of what part they may have played in the proceedings. However, even though you may be trying to save time, don't make the mistake of trying to interview them in a group, because the problem is they're likely to influence each other without even realizing. They listen to what other people are saying, and it sort of blends in with their recollection. Excuse me. They're not trying to mislead you, but they genuinely start to get a blurred impression of what was happening. So it is not a good idea. You want to get them on their own as soon as possible and take individual statements on a one-to-one basis. So where are you going to take the statement? Well, you could interview them at the scene. It's a possibility. But the problem with that is that being at the scene may actually upset them. especially say it was a friend of theirs who was badly injured, or worst case scenario was killed. It's really going to distress them. So it may not be a good idea. So you want to interview them in a quiet, informal setting where you're not going to be disturbed. In the corner of a busy office doesn't work because people wandering in and out all the time. They're going to be reluctant to speak frankly anyway because of being overheard. And it's going to be distracting, people going past all the time and looking at what you're doing. So you want a separate room where it's nice and quiet. As regards the layout of the room, then what I suggest is you don't use the standard official desk. You sit at one side, they sit at the other. The problem is that that desk is in fact not only a physical barrier, excuse me, it's not just a physical barrier, it's also a psychological barrier. It separates the two of you. And you don't want to do that. You want to try and build a rapport with them. So one way of doing it is to have the chairs at sort of 45 degrees to each other, with a small table in between where you can put your notes and so on. But you are going into a relaxed format there. You're just talking to them gently and quietly. It's not an official interview, and you want to get them relaxed. You must remember at all times that no matter what has happened, no matter what part you think they may or may not have played in what happened, they are likely upset or traumatized, so you treat them with compassion. Every person, no matter what you think of them individually, is entitled to be treated properly and with compassion. So reassure them at the start that what you're doing is not looking for somebody to blame, because that's companies who do that are making a very big mistake. Now, reassure them at the start, you simply try to find out what happened so it doesn't happen again. And if they start getting tired or distressed or upset, then fine, take a short break, get them a coffee or whatever, and then resume the interview. It's not meant to be an ordeal for them. They may find it a bit stressful, and there's not much you can do about that, but you want to make it as painless as possible. The more you work with them, the more they're going to cooperate with you, and the more you're going to get out of the interview. So where you take the statement is very important. Now, of course, statements are all about, I'll correct that. It's not all about asking questions, it's also about listening. But asking questions is a key part of the process. So what you need to do, where possible, is to ask what is called an open question. Now, these are questions that can't be answered by a simple yes or no. Quick example, asking somebody, is it raining? Well, that is that is a closed question because that can be answered by yes or no. You want an open question where a yes, no doesn't work. So you ask, what is the weather doing? Rather than, is it raining? What is the weather doing requires them to give you more information as to what the weather's about. So you don't want to ask questions that we answer yes or no. Actually, looking at that, that's right, open question can't be answered yes or no. I'm getting confused by my own slides. It must be the time of day. Yeah, a closed question, that's one that can be answered yes or no, is useful if you're asking basic questions just to set the scene. For example, are you the manager? Were you in the warehouse when this happened? Yes. So you've got it all cleared out the way. You now know where you're starting. And then you go into the open questions. Tell me what happened and so on. You want to avoid leading questions. And it's easy to do this, but a leading question suggests the sort of answer you're looking for. Things like, oh, I assume his comments made you very angry. The impression you're giving is that you think he was made angry. You're expecting to say, yes, I was angry. You don't want to do that. The better way to ask that question is, he was talking to you. How did that make you feel? That's an open question. You can't answer it yes or no. They've got to give you some information about how they were feeling. And they may have been feeling angry. They may have been resigned. They may have thought the boss was an idiot. You weren't taking him seriously. You'll find out by asking the open question, not the leading question. Also, a very common mistake, often done if somebody's in a rush, is to ask multiple questions, such as, so did you go to the office and who told you to do that? And was it the supervisor or whoever? You're asking a number of questions all rolled together. And there are a number of problems there. First of all, you could confuse the person. They're already stressed out. And now you're asking them multiple questions, which doesn't help. And also, if they've got somewhere to hide, then they can answer the question that's most convenient and just tactfully ignore the question that isn't convenient. So you've got to break the questions up into single questions. Take your time, don't rush at it. Ask them a simple question. Did you go to the office? If the answer is yes, fine. Then why did you go to the office? Well, I was told to. So who told you to go? So you're getting the story, but you're getting it step by step. It's a lot easier to follow what's going on doing that. So avoid multiple questions. It is a common mistake, but it can really be lead to confusion. The other thing to bear in mind is that not just the question itself, but the way you ask the question can determine the quality of the answer that you're going to get. Sounds strange, but if we go back to some research that was done way back in 1974, but it's still valid. Two researchers, two psychologists, Loftus and Palmer, did an experiment, as ever, using students. And what they did was they took groups of students, I think it was 5 different groups, and they showed them the same video clip. These were done one group after another. They weren't done together. But they showed each group the same video clip of an accident between 2 cars, a red car and a blue car. And they told them the exercise was looking at observation. So then they asked them a set of questions about what they just seen, which is all very straightforward. However, there was one particular question which was varied with each group, but only very subtly. And the question was about the estimated speed at which the cars came together. So it was essentially, the question was about how fast were the cars going when they, and then they put in different phrases. So with one group, it was when they smashed into each other. Another group was when they collided with each other, and so on. And the 5th group was when they came into contact with each other. Now, you might think that that's something and nothing. It's the same question asked different ways. So what? Actually, it was significant. They got the students to estimate the speeds, and then they took the average speed, the estimated speed for each group, and they compared them, and they found there were significant differences. And not only that, but the more violent, if you like, the more expressive the question had been, then the higher was the estimated average speed. Believe it or not, the difference between the estimated speed for the group who were asked about them smashing into each other and the group who were asked about them coming into contact with each other was about 16 kilometers an hour. That's 16 kilometers an hour. The more violent the word, the higher the estimated speed became. And it wasn't just a fluke, because they had 5 different groups with 5 similar but different questions of decreasing severity, and they found there was a linear relationship The more violent the word was, then the higher the speed, right down. There were no variations. So it went from something like going miles per hour from 40.8 to 38 to 34 to 31. They came down in sequence as the question became more and more innocuous. So the question controlled the answer. You ask somebody, was he screaming with anger? You get a different answer to, was he annoyed? It's the same question, but it's phrased differently. The phrasing is important. So not only have you got to think about the wording you're using, but think about how you're using it. If you seem arrogant or threatening, then a number of things can happen. The witness might simply refuse to cooperate. They might walk out, or they might lodge a complaint, and you find that interview is actually ruled invalid because you are pressurizing, what they call a coercive interview, and you don't want that. So you've got to be polite. You've got to be professional. Think about the words you use. Don't get emotive with your questioning. And remember, I put in the bottom there that courtesy costs nothing, but actually can pay very well in the dividend you get from it. So ask the questions properly. It's always best in interview to think out the sort of questions you want to ask. Map them out in your mind on a piece of paper so you know what you're trying to do. So the witness statement is a person's recollection. Fair enough. But what goes into the witness statement? Well, it's the personal recollection of what happened. So they put in things that they saw, that they heard, that they did, that they felt. It's a personal feeling. In legal terms, the phrase they use, certainly in the UK, the phrase they use is that these are things that the person can speak to. I saw, I heard, I picked up, I moved. These are things I did, and I can talk about them because I did them. What you don't want to do is to put in opinions, rumor, gossip. And the reason is that these cannot be tested. If you go to a tribunal of some kind and your witness is giving an opinion, how is the other side allowed to test that? They can't. It's just an opinion. I don't know where it's come from. It may or may not be valid. So you do not put things like opinions and gossip into witness statements. From an investigative point of view, if one person gives you a piece of gossip, you tend to ignore it. If half a dozen witnesses are saying the same thing, then although you can't put that in the statement, maybe they're pointing the way to something that you should be looking at later. So it's what they call gathering intelligence. But it can't go in the statement, and I can't stress that too much. The statement is purely a personal statement, things that they can speak to. Who should write the statement? Now, again, if you've got a busy investigator, a lot of things to try and do, there's a temptation, having had the interview, you know what was said, they know what was said. Well, can they just write it down for you? Seems straightforward, but it's not the best thing to do. It's a big mistake because either they're going to leave things out or they're going to put things in which are irrelevant. So whichever way they do it, the odds are you'll have to go back and rewrite the whole thing yourself anyway. So it's best to do it from the beginning. So what you should do is you take it at their dictation. So they talk to you and you write it down slowly. You use their words, not yours. And also, I haven't put on the slide, but it's important, write it down from their point of view. So rather than he went to the office and he made a telephone call, you write it down as I went to the office and I made a telephone call. So they are the person talking. So you use their words and you let them go along with their own pace. It's also an opportunity for you to actually clarify what's being said or expanding upon something. Because you might suddenly appear to you, you said, oh, hang on a minute, what did he mean by that? Well, just clarify that for me. And then you can put that into the statement. Now, what I've done is a very simple statement as written by somebody, an example, the sort of thing you get based on experience. They've already talked to you, they think you know what's going on, so when they're writing it, they simply write the minimum. Remember, a lot of people aren't used to writing formal reports, so they don't want to do it. They'll try and get it done as fast as they can. So they put the bare bones into the statement, okay? So I just move my photograph out of the way so I can see what's going on. There we are. So what they've written is, I was working in the yard when somebody shouted in the warehouse. Fair enough. Brian was on the floor. He'd been hit by a truck. Peter drives the truck. Peter was saying sorry. The ambulance took him away. Okay, fair enough. That sort of covers it. But, as I'll now show you, there are an awful lot of questions that are still to be answered. We'll now look at the statement annotated by me. I put marks in to show where the areas to look at. And there are 10 of them. You know, there's what, 4 lines. There are 10 things that need to be queried. So what I'll do, I've got them on the next slide. I'll flick backwards and forwards between the two so you can follow what I'm doing. So I was working in the yard. Okay, working in the yard. When? You should always try and start a statement with time, date, and place. So on Tuesday, the 14th of January, I was in the main warehouse yard at the Cairo factory. Time, date, and place. So people now know exactly what you're talking about. I was in the yard when somebody shouted. There's 2 questions there. First of all, somebody shouted. Who shouted? You need to know, because these people may be a witness. You may need to follow them up and make sure you've got all the witnesses. Have they got a story to tell you? Somebody shouted. What did they shout? Were they shouting, it was a telephone call for the supervisor? Were they shouting, who's taken my sandwiches? Were they shouting, I'm fed up, I'm going home? Or were they shouting a warning for somebody? So it's important to know what they were shouting. In the warehouse, they were shouting in the warehouse. Okay, which warehouse? There may well be more than one. You need to clarify that. Brian was on the floor. Okay, Brian who? The company may have more than one Brian, so let's establish who it actually was. He'd been hit by a truck. Okay. What kind of truck? Was it a forklift truck? Was it a 40-ton lorry? There's a big difference in those. So let's get the detail. The person writing the statement won't have put that down because he knows what he means, and he knows what you know he knows what he means. But it's not clear to a third person reading this. Peter drives the truck. Well, again, the question arises, Peter who? You've got to identify people as much as possible. Peter was saying sorry. Now, there's an interesting question. Is this the same Peter who drives the truck, or was it another Peter? We don't know. You've got to clarify. And Peter was saying sorry. This Peter, whoever he was saying sorry. Yeah, but what exactly was he saying? Sorry, I hit you. Sorry, you've been injured. Sorry, but it's your own fault. You shouldn't have run in front of me. What exactly was he saying? Because that could be crucial, but we don't know. And then the ambulance took him away. Well, it's fairly obvious that the ambulance are taking Brian away, but we don't know for certain. Because it may be that Brian has actually said, I don't want an ambulance, I'm all right. But while he was doing that, the supervisor had one look, had a heart attack and collapsed. So the ambulance has taken the supervisor away. We don't know. So there you can see one simple 4-line statement, and there's a lot of things that need to be clarified. And in some respects, it could have opened up more lines of inquiry, especially number 2, somebody shouted. Who did they shout? That could be a witness you didn't even know about. So it's important to take the statements in detail. The format of the statement be fairly straightforward, but again, you've got to identify people. So you want to start off listing their name, and not just their name, but if possible, an identifier, maybe a works number or a payroll number. Because in a large organization, you may have 2 people with the same name, and you want to be certain if the lawyers will look at this 6 months later, then they need to know which person they're meant to be talking to. So you need to identify him clearly. You need the date of that statement when you were taking it. Put a note of who took it, in other words, you, with your identifier, and also the number of pages overall. That makes certain the pages don't get lost. The witness reads the completed statement. So you take it and you number the pages as you go. Once you've finished, they then have the opportunity, because it's their statement. They go back through the statement, they read it. If there's something in there which they're not happy about, they may want to take something out or put something in or change a word. Fine, that's up to them, it's their statement. But you've got to ensure that any amendments they make are initialed at the side. Excuse me. Make sure it's initialed so there's no query later on, no doubt about who changed this statement. They changed it and they've signed to show they've made the changes and they agree with them. It's only when they are happy with the statement as it is, does the person sign it, and they sign at the bottom of each page and then again at the end of the statement itself. But they do not sign, and you cannot force them to sign unless they are happy. Because remember the phrase, they are going to speak to that statement. And if something goes wrong, they've got to justify what they've said. So you cannot force somebody. If you force somebody, if a manager, overzealous, shall we say, demands that somebody sign the statement to just stop wasting time, that statement becomes invalid because they've been forced into doing it. You cannot force somebody to sign a statement. So what happens if a person can't read? They've got literacy problems. Okay, fine. What you would then do is you would read the statement back to them slowly, making certain, explain to them, if you want to change anything, please let me know and I'll change it for you. And then at the end, once they're happy with it, they sign it and any alterations that you've made on their behalf. And then you put a note at the bottom of that statement confirming you read it back to them and that they then signed it after you'd read it back. If the person is a foreign worker, so that you're not working in their native language, you may want to use an interpreter, in which case the interpreter would read it back to them and the interpreter would sign at the bottom that they'd read the statement back. It's not difficult, it's just ensuring that there's no queries later on about, since this person can't read, how come he signed the statement? What made him do that? You explain quite openly how it was done. Nothing wrong with doing it that way, as long as people understand what it is you're actually doing. So having got the statement at last, what are you going to do with it? Well, it's a piece of the jigsaw. So you've got to store it safely once it's been taken. What I recommend is that you put the original statement in You noted in the investigation record that you're keeping, you should be keeping a record of this. You give each statement a unique reference number, and then you put it into a clear plastic envelope and you seal that in a secure cabinet. And that's just to prevent unauthorized people ferreting around and having a look at it or trying to change it. People can be inquisitive and poke their nose in where they shouldn't, so you keep it away from people. I say give it a unique reference number. You don't write the reference number on the statement. What you do is you put it in the envelope, and I would suggest that you use a label, an ordinary paper label. You write your name and the date and the reference number on that label, and then you use it to seal the envelope. And that then has got two benefits. One, you know which document is which because they're each numbered. And secondly, if the envelope is opened because someone wants to look at that document, then they're going to tear the seal. And so you'll know it's happened. Now, that's not to stop people doing that. If you want to take that statement out later and look at it for some reason, then that's fine. You take it out, make a note in the investigation record that you've taken the statement out to examine it. Then you put it back in the envelope and you put in a second label, again with the date and your signature. But you don't stick it over the first label, you stick it next to the first label, so you get a physical record, a visible record of what happened, who opened it, why, and who sealed it back up again. It's just to avoid questions later on about has this statement been tampered with. It's important if you do want to make notes about a statement, it may be you need to cross-reference it with something else, maybe a list of parts that have been ordered or invoices, whatever it happens to be. There's a temptation to get the statement and then tick things off in the statement as you go along, as you find matching pieces or put notes in the margin. You cannot do that with an original statement. It is pristine. Once it's been taken, it's been taken. It can't be altered. So what you have to do is to photocopy that document, whether it be a statement, whether it be a training record, whether it be an invoice, doesn't matter. They're all individual, unique pieces of evidence, and you can't appear to be tampering with them. So use the photocopier, make your notes on the photocopy as much as you like, make more than one photocopy if you like, that's entirely up to you, but you do not touch the first document, the original document. Once you've got that, it goes into the envelope, it's sealed, it's locked away, it's guarded until such time as the investigation progresses. But it is an easy mistake to make, is to start making notes and reference numbers on the original statement, but it's not best practice. Okay, that's the only short presentation. It's quite a big topic, but I've kept it short deliberately because I know time is ticking on and I wanted to make space for any questions that people may have. But I hope you found this to be helpful. And so I'll hand back to Karim and to Julie. And if you've got any questions, then please let me know and I'll do what I can to answer. So it's over to you two.
Thank you, Andy. That's another really interesting presentation and a popular topic, judging by the amount of questions. So let's start with the first one. Thank you for this presentation. I want to know about how to treat a witness who insists on hiding information about the accident for such reason, like they sympathize with the person who made the accident happen.
Right. That is taking us into the whole area, the interesting area of investigative techniques of interviewing. And there are ways of doing it. Essentially, the method you want to use, something like that, it's a three-stage method, and it works for all witnesses. But it's called conversation management. So the first part, I mean, the idea of setting the people at ease and so on, that all still applies. But the first phase is you ask them to tell you the story in their own words, in their own time. So you basically listen. Then the second part is called the interviewer phase, is where you go back and you clarify what they've said, things you haven't quite understood, or where you want some more detail, like Brian was on the floor. Well, Brian who? Let's get the details. Now, you're not challenging at this point. You are simply trying to establish what happened, get the detail. If at the end of that, you feel, no, this person is hiding something for some reason, then you go into the third phase, which is what's called the challenge phase. Now, you have to be careful how you do it. So I'm giving a very quick summary here. You've got to be careful. You don't shout, yell, threaten, get sarcastic, make accusations. You simply take them back over the evidence they've given you, point out the anomalies, and ask them to explain the anomaly. Maybe that you misunderstood what was going on, which is fine because they can now explain. If, however, they are lying, then they've got to try and cover that lie, either admit it or cover it up. And if they're trying to cover it, they'll make it more complicated. So you gently drill down into what they're doing. And you can then show eventually that, you know, you're saying this, then you're saying that, coming together. So you explain to me how it works. There seems to be a traffic jam somewhere. You explain to me how it works. So that's essentially how you do it, is you go through the statement with them, point out the anomalies, and ask them to explain. If they can't explain, then so be it. You know what you're thinking, and you can take the investigation forward. But that's a topic on its own, but I hope that helps.
Thank you, Andy. That was a really good summary for a complex question. So the next question is, thank you, Andy. Is it appropriate to record the statement after asking for approval from the witness?
Yeah, I can't see a reason why not. Again, I've got to be careful because I'm obviously based in the UK, and I'm not certain what local legislation says. Your legal system may have different ideas about it, but assuming that the lawyers have got no objection, then I can only see there being an advantage, because it means you haven't got to keep stopping to take detailed notes. And also, it's in everybody's interest, because there's no, if there's a query about, did you say that, or did I hear you say that? No, I said something else. Okay, fine. You've got the recording to go back to clarify exactly what was and was not said. So I see no reason, as long as the recording is done overtly, they know they're making it up.
Great, thank you, Andy. And then this is a follow-up question. In the same context, is it okay to play an excerpt from CCTV in front of a witness, even if it could contradict with the statement of said witness?
But yeah, I mean, the CCTV is what it is. And this goes back to the previous idea of the person not necessarily telling the truth for whatever reason. And there's many reasons why people don't want to admit to things. They're not just lying to cover up their own mistakes. There could be a whole web of ideas behind that. But yeah, you can put it to them in the same ways you might show that invoice. That mean, I see no reason why you can't show them the video clip and say, well, what does that mean? And see what happens.
Great, thank you. This is an interesting question. How can I write and also maintain eye contact to reassure the witness? Sometimes the witness feels threatened by writing the statement, especially if I've asked them to sign it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way around it. It's a matter of explaining and reassuring that you say it to me, I will write it down, but you won't sign it until you've read it and you're happy with it. So it's getting their confidence and their trust that you're not writing down something they don't agree with. No matter what you write down, it's simply trying to keep a record of what's happening, and they have the sanction. If they don't like what you've written, then they don't sign it. It's as simple as that. So it's getting their trust.
Great, thank you. This is also an interesting one. What if the witness refuses to disclose his name for political reasons, for example?
Interesting one. And that, if that's being done for political reasons, if they are, say, afraid of repercussions, then, I mean, we're talking here about industrial accidents, okay, not law enforcement. So if the person refuses to cooperate and they tell you, I'm not giving my name because I'm concerned about reprisals of some kind, then you can try and reassure them that, you know, you're not looking to get reprisals for them. But if they don't want to cooperate, if they're in fear for some reason, then so be it. There's nothing you can do about that. You can't force them into giving a statement. All you can do is make a note in the investigation report that there was a person who did see something but declined to cooperate because of fears about A, B, or whatever.
Great, thank you. There's some great questions this evening. really testing you. Based on your experience, how will you know if a witness is telling the truth or not? Any body language examples, for instance?
All right, we're back at a whole new topic. Yeah. Okay, body language. There's a lot talked about body language, and some of it doesn't hold up. For example, certainly in the Western European culture, there's the belief that a person won't look you in the eye if they're lying to you. It's a matter of trust and regret and so on. Experiments done in the USA looking at people being interviewed before they went on trial who were then convicted shows that half the time, half the people would stare you in the eye and lie to you, and half. So that is a bit of a fallacy. There's an argument that if people look in a certain direction, then they're trying to think of an answer and they're trying to make it up. I'm not so certain about that. With body language, essentially what they do is they look for clusters, as they call it. And very quickly, when you start the interview, as you're reassuring them, you are making a mental note of how they're behaving in terms of how quickly they answer you, what their voice is like. Is it high, low? Are they loud? Are they quiet? Do they take a while to answer? Are they looking at you? Are they nervous? And so on. So that gives you what they call a baseline. So that's what they're like when they're not being pressurized. You then ask the questions. Now, at a certain point, you find a change in temperament. It may be not necessarily that they're lying, but you've got something which is stressing them out. So whereas before they would answer immediately and look you in the eye and they talk in a normal pitch, now you ask him a particular question, he hesitates before he answers, he looks down to the ground and he starts to shuffle around nervously. That does not mean he's lying. What it might, and I stress, might mean is that he's under stress. The question is troubling him. Why it's troubling him, you don't know. He might be lying, he might be something totally different. But body language is powerful, but it has to be read the right way. For example, there's always a comment about, oh, the person was lying. Well, that's fine. If a person is lying, the adrenaline causes the mouth to dry up, so you lick your lips. However, if the person is simply thirsty, they're going to lick their lips. So you can't take one indicator on its own. You've got to look for clusters, and you've got to be very, very careful. Interesting subject, body language, but you've got to know what you're doing, otherwise you're going to come unstuck.
Thank you. I'm not sure how many more questions we've got to go through, but I'm going to answer some of the quicker ones.
Yeah.
So I think this one is saying, what can I do if I believe that somebody has been forced to make certain statements?
Interesting question. For a start, then you take that into account for what they're saying. You can, if you're in a quiet room, if you can get their trust, you can put it to them. Look, I know what you're saying, and I don't believe it, but I think somebody is forcing you. Now, if that's the case, talk to me and we'll try and sort it out. So again, it's going back to getting their trust. But you don't make promises you can't keep. But if they don't want to talk to you, then so be it. But it may be a matter you have to refer back to senior management, that there's something going on here, that witnesses are being persuaded by somebody not to cooperate. There's something happening. It's a complicated problem now.
Great, thank you. You're getting some interesting ones this evening. What can I do if a witness told me something but wanted to keep it off the record?
Interesting. Well, you're not a police officer and it's not a legal interview. My feeling would be, and it depends on the person and what it is they're talking about and how serious it is. If you don't say anything, you're not going to get the information. What you might want to do is to say, look, I'll try and keep it hidden if I can, but I can't make promises. Again, it's going back to trust. There's nothing to stop you taking the information without recording it. As I said previously, you regard that as intelligence gathering, and then you look at some other way of finding out if what they're saying is true or not. But you have to, you don't make promises to somebody you're not going to keep or you can't keep. And it's a matter of trying to find out why it is they don't want it on the record. What's going on behind that? So it comes down to your ability, your tact and persuasion as an investigator to get their trust and to try and tease the answers out of them.
Great, thank you. I've got a number of comments here about it's great to take part in this webinar. Thank you very much for a really informative webinar. I'm just going to read one more question. I'm going to try and read one from somebody who hasn't answered a question up. So I'm really sorry if your question doesn't get answered. So let's finish on this one, and another difficult one. So how do I handle a witness who doesn't take the questions seriously and maybe laughs or makes jokes?
My first question would be, why is he laughing? Is it he simply just cannot understand what's going on, just doesn't care? Or is that some kind of defense mechanism that he doesn't really want to get involved, and so he's trying to laugh it off? That's an interesting line of inquiry. If they are simply going to be uncooperative, then you could point out to them that you're doing this on behalf of management. At some point, you've got to put a report into management explaining what happened and how the investigation went. And if they want you to put a report in saying that you wouldn't take it seriously or wouldn't answer the questions seriously, you were treating it as a joke, then that's what you'll put in your report, and they can explain themselves to their managers. So you're not threatening, but you're simply telling them that, you know, you can play the fool if you want, but I'm going to make a note of what happens anyway. It's entirely up to you. And hopefully they'll see sense.
That's really good advice. Thank you, Andy. Another couple of comments about what a great presentation. Kareem, do you have any questions or closing comments for this evening?
No, nothing from me, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for Kareem for organising yet another fantastic webinar. Thank you for Andy for, I don't think I ever get so many questions and when you're running a webinar, so it's always a really interesting subject that lots of people want to know about. I know. I've got so many questions. There's still comments coming in about what an amazing webinar it is. So looking forward to receiving the recording. So So on that note, just to let everybody know that I will upload the recording onto the IIRSM YouTube channel, hopefully tomorrow, and your attendance certificates will come out this time tomorrow also. So I'd like to thank Kareem, I'd like to thank Andy again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and we hope to see you at the next Egypt branch webinar. Good evening, everyone.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Good evening.